Look, I've been hauling cargo across 17 different star systems for 5 years now, and let me tell you, the job is about as exciting as watching paint dry in zero gravity, which is to say, not at all, because paint doesn't dry in zero gravity. It just floats there, mocking you. My name is Captain Jake Morrison, and up until 3 weeks ago, I was just another human trying to make an honest living in a galaxy that runs on paperwork, bureaucracy, and more paperwork about the bureaucracy. I piloted a mid-sized cargo freighter called the Reasonable Excuse, which I named specifically for moments like the one I'm about to tell you about. So there I was, docked at Zentarian Station Alpha, waiting for my routine cargo inspection. Routine. That's the key word here. I'd done this same inspection maybe 200 times before. The Zentarians are sticklers for protocol, which is fine. I respect protocol. I had all my forms filled out, my cargo manifests in order, and I was sipping my coffee, thinking about how I'd spend my shore leave, binge-watching Earth soap opera. Then Glorp walked into my cargo bay. Now, Glorp is a Zentarian customs officer, which means he's got 4 eyes, 6'10", and the personality of a parking meter that's personally offended by your existence. He's the kind of guy who probably dreams in spreadsheets. Each of his 4 eyes can move independently, which should be useful for inspecting cargo. But mainly, he used it to judge you from multiple angles simultaneously. "Captain Morrison," he said, his translator device making his voice sound like someone gargling gravel. "Your paperwork has a discrepancy." I set down my coffee. "Oh, what kind of discrepancy?" He held up Form 47B, the standard cargo declaration for non-hazardous materials. "This form is filled out in blue ink." I waited for him to continue. He didn't. "Yes," I said slowly. "Blue ink, like always. Regulation 17.3.9 requires navy blue ink specifically. This appears to be royal blue." I blinked. Then I blinked again. "You're kidding. Zentarians do not kid about regulations." "Captain." "Glorp. Buddy, that's the same pen I've used for 5 years. Nobody's ever said anything about it before." His upper left eye twitched. "Nevertheless, the regulation is clear. I cannot approve this cargo transfer until the form is resubmitted in the correct shade of blue." Now, here's the thing. I wasn't upset. I really wasn't. Annoyed, sure, but upset, no. I was about to very calmly ask where I could purchase a navy blue pen when Glorp made a critical error in judgment. He looked at me with all 4 eyes, which in Zentarian culture is supposed to be calming, and said, "Human, you need to calm down." My eye twitched. I was calm. I was extremely calm. I was so calm I could have been a meditation instructor. But the moment someone tells you to calm down when you're already calm, something inside the human brain just snaps. Not in an angry way. In a calculating way. "Calm down," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Yes. You appear agitated about a simple regulatory matter." I set my coffee down very carefully. "Glorp, I'm going to need you to understand something very important. I am absolutely, completely, 100% calm. Your elevated heart rate suggests otherwise. That's just coffee. I'm calm." "Captain Morrison, there's no need to be defensive. Simply fill out the form correctly and we can proceed." I smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found his new hobby. "You know what, Glorp? You're absolutely right. I'm going to fill out that form, and then I'm going to review every single regulation in the Zentarian Customs Code to make sure I am in complete compliance. Every single one." Glorp's confidence wavered slightly. "That won't be necessary." "Oh, but I insist. I want to be calm about this. Very, very calm." That was 3 weeks ago. In that time, I had filed 47,312 formal complaints, each one meticulously researched and technically valid. Turns out, when you actually read the Zentarian Customs Code, about 90% of their stations are in violation of their own regulations. Who knew? Glorp knew now. Oh, Glorp definitely knew now. Ambassador Keela had been having a perfectly decent morning until the emergency message came through. As a Floraxian diplomat, she prided herself on her ability to mediate conflicts between species with wildly different cultures, biologies, and communication styles. She had 17 tentacles, which meant she could literally handle multiple problems at once, and she'd negotiated peace treaties between civilizations that didn't even breathe the same kind of atmosphere. But she had never dealt with a human who'd been told to calm down. She found Captain Morrison in his ship's common area, which looked less like a living space and more like a conspiracy theorist's dream office. Papers were everywhere. Actual, physical papers, which apparently humans still used when they wanted to make a point. A whiteboard dominated one wall, covered in what appeared to be a flowchart labeled Revenge Plan Phase 1 through 847. Jake looked up from his tablet and smiled pleasantly. Ambassador Keela, coffee. Captain Morrison, we need to discuss your recent complaints to the Zentarian Customs Authority. Of course. I've been very reasonable about the whole thing. Would you like to see my filing system? It's alphabetized by regulation number. Keela glanced at the stacks of papers. You've filed 47,000 complaints in 3 weeks. 47,312, actually. But who's counting? Jake sipped his coffee. Well, me, I'm counting. This is somewhat excessive, don't you think? Is it? Because according to Zentarian Regulation 3.7.2, any citizen or visiting entity has the right to file complaints about regulatory violations without limitation. I'm just exercising my rights. Calmly. There was something about the way he said calmly that made Keela's tentacles twitch nervously. Officer Glorp has been demoted to sanitation duty. Has he? Interesting. He's currently hiding in a supply closet on level 7. That's unfortunate. Captain Morrison, I'm here to mediate this situation. Surely we can come to some kind of arrangement. Jake set down his coffee and leaned back in his chair. Ambassador, I appreciate your position. I really do. But I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I'm just being thorough. When someone tells you to calm down, the only appropriate response is to be so calm that it becomes a form of art. Keela had dealt with hostile negotiations before. She'd mediated disputes between species that communicated through chemical warfare. But something about this human's pleasant demeanor was more unnerving than any overt aggression she'd encountered. Perhaps, she said carefully, you should calm down about this. Jake's expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. He simply reached under his desk and pulled out a second whiteboard. This one was blank. He picked up a marker and wrote at the top, additional revenge plans. Ambassador Keela suggestions. I'm sorry, Keela said quickly, her tentacles recoiling. I didn't mean to imply anything. Please forget I said that. Oh, it's fine, Jake said, still writing. I'm perfectly calm about it. In fact, I'm so calm that I've started learning Floraxian diplomatic protocol. Did you know that under Section 42 of the Interspecies Diplomatic Relations Treaty, ambassadors are required to file bi-weekly reports about their mediation attempts? I did a quick search. You're about 17 reports behind. Keela felt a sensation that Floraxians only experienced during extreme stress. Her tentacles tried to tie themselves into knots. How did you access that information? Public records, request. Very calm, very legal, very biteable. Jake smiled again. I've got time. I've got nothing but time and spite. Spite, sorry, that's a human term. It means the willingness to inconvenience yourself if it means you can inconvenience someone else more. It's basically our primary export. Keela realized she was out of her depth. This wasn't a diplomatic crisis. This was something far more dangerous. This was a human who had been told to calm down and had decided to weaponize bureaucracy itself. I need to consult with some experts, she said, backing toward the door. Take your time, Jake called after her. I'll be here. Being calm. Filing complaints. Maybe I'll start cross-referencing Zentarian regulations with Galactic commerce law. You know, for fun. As the door closed, Keela heard him humming cheerfully. Somehow, that was the most terrifying part of all. Dr. Reina Vasquez had been working at the Galactic Medical Institute for 6 years, and she'd thought she'd seen everything. She'd treated methane breathers for oxygen poisoning, helped a silicon-based life form with what could only be described as extremely bad heartburn, and once diagnosed the quantum phase being with anxiety about existing in multiple states simultaneously. But when Ambassador Keela showed up at her office looking like she'd seen the heat death of the universe, Rena knew this was about humans doing human things again. "Let me guess," Rena said, not looking up from her tablet. "Someone told a human to calm down." Keela's tentacles drooped. "How did you know?" "Because you've got that look. The one that says, you've just discovered that humans have a psychological trigger that makes absolutely no sense to any other species in the galaxy." Rena gestured to a chair. "Sit down. This is going to take a while." She pulled up a holographic display, showing what appeared to be a human brain, except it was labeled with annotations like Spite Center, Petty Revenge Lobe, and the part that keeps receipts. "Okay, so here's the thing about humans," Rena began. "We evolved on a death world where everything was trying to kill us. Predators, whether other humans, you name it. So we developed this really interesting survival mechanism called when someone or something tried to make us back down, our brains interpreted that as a threat. But telling someone to calm down isn't a threat," Keela protested. "To you, it's not. To a human, it's the ultimate dismissal. It's basically saying your feelings are invalid, your reaction is wrong, and you need to change your emotional state to accommodate me. And our brains hear that and go, oh, is that so? Let me show you just how calm I can be while systematically dismantling your entire life." Keela's tentacles nodded. "That's terrifying." "Oh, it gets better. Let me show you some examples." Rena pulled up a series of files. "This is my daughter, Maya. She's 16. Last month, her teacher told her to calm down about a missing homework assignment. Now, Maya had turned in the homework. She had proof. But instead of just showing the proof, which would have been the logical thing to do, she wrote a 50-page thesis documenting every instance of the teacher's organizational failures over the past 3 years, complete with testimony from other students, and presented it to the school board. What happened? The teacher now uses a digital tracking system for all assignments, and Maya got extra credit, because of course she did. Rena scrolled through more files. Here's another one. Human merchant named Helen Ko got into a pricing dispute with a vendor on Traxxas Prime. The vendor told her to calm down about a 5-credit difference. Helen bought out the vendor's competitor's entire inventory, then sold it at cost in the station's marketplace. The vendor went out of business in 2 weeks. Helen lost about 15,000 credits on the deal. "That's not logical at all," Keela said. "Logic has nothing to do with it. It's about the principle. Humans will absolutely harm themselves if it means proving a point. We once had a war on Earth that lasted over 100 years because someone said the other side was overreacting. 100 years. Over an insult. So what you're saying is that this Captain Morrison situation is normal?" "Oh, completely normal. In fact, he's being pretty restrained. I know a guy who learned an entire alien language, became fluent in it, passed the bar exam in that species' legal system, and then filed lawsuits for 3 years, all because someone told him to calm down about a parking ticket." Keela looked like she might faint, which was impressive since Fluorexians didn't technically have blood pressure. "How do we stop this?" "You don't. You let it run its course. The human will either achieve whatever satisfaction they're looking for, or they'll get bored and move on. Usually the former, because humans are very, very good at holding grudges. There has to be some way to de-escalate." Rena leaned forward. "There is, but it requires something most species find incredibly difficult. You have to actually listen, not just wait for your turn to talk. Actually hear what the human is saying. Acknowledge their feelings without judgment. And whatever you do, never, ever tell them to calm down. Once you say those words, you've declared war. And humans are very good at war. This is a species-wide trait. Oh yeah. From toddlers to elders. You tell a human toddler to calm down, They'll scream for 6 hours straight just to make a point. You tell a 70-year-old human to calm down. They'll outlive you out of sheer spite and dance on your grave. Keela processed this information with growing horror. The galaxy needs to know about this. Trust me, Rena said, pulling up another file labeled incidents involving humans and the phrase, calm down, which appeared to be several thousand pages long. You're not the first person to figure this out. You're just the first one who's going to actually do something about it. Good luck with that. You're going to need it. Unfortunately for the galaxy at large, the memo about not telling humans to calm down hadn't circulated quite fast enough. The incidents were piling up faster than a Zentarian could fill out forms in triplicate. On Traxxas Prime, a merchant named Vexel made a critical error with human trader Helen Kaio. Helen had been negotiating a bulk purchase of rare minerals when Vexel quoted her a price that was clearly 30% higher than his usual rate. When Helen pointed this out, Vexel made a dismissive gesture with his antennae and said, "Perhaps you should calm down about a few credits." 3 days later, Helen had purchased the entire inventory of Vexel's 3 biggest competitors. She then set up a temporary stall directly across from his shop and proceeded to sell the exact same minerals at 15% below market value. Vexel's customer base evaporated overnight. Helen operated at a loss for 2 months, just long enough to drive Vexel into bankruptcy, then closed up shop and went back to her regular trading routes. When asked why she'd wasted so much money on revenge, Helen simply said it wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. And then she smiled in that particularly human way that made every other species nervous. Meanwhile, on Station Epsilon 7, Security Officer Crix made the mistake of telling human engineer Marcus Webb to calm down about a parking violation. Marcus had parked his shuttle in what he insisted was a legal spot. Crix disagreed. The argument escalated until Crix, exasperated, told Marcus to calm down and just pay the fine. Marcus paid the fine. Then he spent the next 6 weeks analyzing the entire station's parking algorithm. He found 17,000 inconsistencies, 3 major flaws that could cause traffic jams, and 1 error that had been causing false violations for 5 years. He rewrote the entire system, submitted it to the station's management with full documentation, and somehow got promoted to Chief of Transportation Systems. Crix now worked under him. Crix did not tell anyone to calm down anymore. The most spectacular incident involved a restaurant on the pleasure planet of Hedonia 3. The restaurant's manager, a pompous Solarian named Torv, had told human food critic Jennifer Park to calm down about receiving cold soup. Jennifer had politely pointed out that the soup was supposed to be served hot, according to the menu. Torvald had laughed and said she was being dramatic. Jennifer smiled, thanked him for the meal, and left. Her review went viral across 17 systems. It was a masterpiece of devastating criticism, documenting not just the temperature of the soup, but analyzing the molecular composition of every dish served, the efficiency of the kitchen's workflow, the questionable sourcing of ingredients, and the statistical probability that the chef had learned to cook from an instruction manual written by someone who had never actually tasted food. The review was so thorough, so meticulously researched, and so brutally accurate that it became required reading in 3 separate culinary schools as an example of proper food analysis. Torv's restaurant didn't just get bad reviews. It became a case study in what not to do. The Galactic Council could no longer ignore the pattern. Ambassador Keela called an emergency session, and for the first time in Council history, the primary topic was human psychology. "We have a problem," Keela announced to the assembled representatives. "Humans have a specific psychological trigger that we have been inadvertently activating across the galaxy. When you tell a human to calm down, they interpret it as a challenge." Council member Vrix, a metalloid who prided himself on pure logic and efficiency, scoffed. His mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "That is illogical. Telling someone to calm down is a standard de-escalation technique used by 47 different species. Not for humans," Keela said. "I don't believe it. Humans are supposed to be reasonable. Their diplomatic record shows a capacity for negotiation and compromise. Unless you tell them to calm down." Vrix's optical sensors flickered in the equivalent of an eye roll. "This is absurd. I refuse to believe an entire species can be so petty." He turned to the human representative, a tired-looking woman named Ambassador Patricia Joe, Ambassador Joe, this meeting is running 14 minutes over schedule. Can you please calm down about the time and let us proceed with other business? The chamber went silent. Every representative who'd been paying attention to Keela's presentation collectively held their breath, or equivalent respiratory function. Patricia looked at Vrix for a long moment. Then she smiled. Sure, Vrix. I'm perfectly calm about it. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council had a new scheduling system. It was brutally efficient, accounting for every possible variable, including species-specific time perception, biological needs, and cultural preferences. Every meeting now started and ended precisely on time. No exceptions. Vrix's personal efficiency ratings, which he had kept private for 200 years, were now part of public record. Apparently, despite his constant criticism of others' time management, Vrix himself had missed approximately 30% of his own deadlines over the past decade. He was also teaching a mandatory seminar called Respecting Human Communication Styles, a logical approach to not getting your life ruined. The first lesson was don't tell humans to calm down. The entire rest of the semester was just that lesson repeated in different ways. Patricia attended the first seminar, sitting in the front row, smiling pleasantly. Vrix's optical sensors dimmed every time he looked at her. The galaxy was learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. The Galactic Council, being the bureaucratic entity that it was, did what all bureaucratic entities do when faced with a problem they finally understand. They formed a committee, held 17 subcommittee meetings, drafted a proposal, revised it 43 times, and then issued an official directive. Emergency Directive 8472 was distributed to every station, planet, colony, and vessel registered with the Galactic Council. It was translated into 6,000 languages and broadcast on all official channels. The title was succinct. Under no circumstances tell a human to calm down. The directive came with training videos, which were surprisingly they featured actual humans demonstrating proper and improper de-escalation techniques. The improper techniques all ended with the humans smiling in that particular way that now made every alien in the galaxy nervous, followed by ominous text. 3 weeks later, this station's entire administrative system was replaced. Captain Jake Morrison became an unlikely celebrity. The council hired him as a consultant, which meant he got paid to fly around the galaxy, telling people about the incident with Glorp and explaining basic human psychology. He showed up to these lectures in his cargo pilot jumpsuit, drinking coffee from a mug that said, "I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed," which somehow made everything he said more terrifying. Look, Jake would say, 2 rooms full of attentive aliens. We're not unreasonable. We really aren't. We just have this thing about being told how to feel. You want to de-escalate a situation with a human. Here's the secret. Listen. That's it. Just listen. He'd pull up a holographic display showing proper alternatives to calm down. Try, I hear you. Try. That sounds frustrating. Try just not saying anything and actually listening to what we're saying. Revolutionary, I know, but here's what you don't do. He'd tap the display, and the words "calm down" would appear in large red letters with a circle and slash through them. You say those words, you've just activated what we call spite mode. And in spite mode, humans are capable of things that will astound you. We'll learn your language. We'll memorize your regulations. We'll restructure your entire society if that is what it takes to prove we were right about that parking space. The lectures were always packed. Jake's delivery was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that it made the content even more impactful. He wasn't threatening anyone. He was just explaining reality, like a nature documentary narrator describing the hunting patterns of apex predators. During one lecture on Zentarian Station Alpha, which had been completely reorganized since the Glorp incident, Jake had a surprise guest. Glorp himself walked into the auditorium, his 4 eyes looking in different directions. Sign of extreme nervousness in Zentarian body language. Jake paused mid. Glorp, good to see you, buddy. The audience went silent. Glorp approached the stage slowly. Captain Morrison, I wanted to publicly apologize for my actions that initiated this situation. I was dismissive of your concerns. I made assumptions about your emotional state. And I used a phrase that I now understand is highly provocative to human psychology. I'm sorry. It was a good apology. Specific. Taking responsibility. No excuses. Jake studied him for a moment, then smiled. This time, it was actually a friendly smile. Apology accepted, Glorp. Water under the bridge. Really? Glorp's relief was visible in all four eyes. Yeah, really. You learned something. I learned something. The galaxy learned something. It's all good. And the complaints, Jake's smile didn't waver. Oh, those are staying on file. For posterity, Glorp's upper left eye twitched, but he nodded. I understand. Thank you, Captain. They shared a drink after the lecture, which became a photo opportunity that went viral across the galaxy. The image of a human and a Zentarian having a friendly conversation became the unofficial symbol of the Listen Du Yant dismiss campaign that followed. The Galactic Council went all out on implementation. Bright yellow signs appeared near human-frequented areas with simple messages. Calm down, free zone. Humans, welcome. Dismissive language, not. And Jake's personal favorite. This establishment respects all emotional states. Embassy training programs added an entire semester on human emotional triggers. New diplomats had to pass a certification exam that included scenarios like a human is upset about a service error. What do you? The correct answer was never tell them to calm down. That answer now resulted in automatic failure in remedial training. The most interesting change was in customer service across the galaxy. Complaints that used to be dismissed or minimized were now actually addressed. It turned out that when you actually listened to problems and tried to solve them, people were less upset. Revolutionary concept, apparently. Jake watched all of this from his ship. The reasonable excuse. Still hauling cargo across the stars. Except now, when he docked at stations, aliens greeted him with respectful nods. Customs officers processed his paperwork without comment. Even when he occasionally used the wrong shade of blue ink just to see their reaction, they'd notice, but they'd just quietly stamp the form and move on. Nobody wanted to be the next Glorp. See, 6 months after Emergency Directive 8472 went into effect, the galaxy had adapted in ways nobody had predicted. Conflict resolution had actually improved across the board. When you couldn't dismiss someone's feelings by telling them to calm down, you had to actually engage with their concerns. Radical concept. Ambassador Keela found herself with less work than she'd had in years. Not because there were fewer disputes, but because they were being resolved at lower levels by people who had learned to actually listen to each other. She spent her newfound free time writing a book titled What Humans Taught Me About Diplomacy and Why I'm Still Traumatized. She sat in her office one afternoon, reviewing incident reports from across the galaxy, and realized something profound. The human spite reflex, which had seemed like such a dangerous liability, had accidentally made everyone better at communication. Because when you knew that dismissing someone could result in them dedicating their entire existence to proving you wrong, you tended to take people more seriously from the start. Captain Jake Morrison was back to hauling cargo, enjoying the return to routine. His ship's hold was full of agricultural supplies, bound for a colony on the outer rim, and he was sipping his coffee, thinking about absolutely nothing important, which was exactly how he liked it. Then his communication console chimed. Message from the Galactic Council. He opened it with mild curiosity and immediately started laughing. The Council wanted to know if they could somehow bottle human determination and make it available to other species. They apparently realized that humanity's tendency to escalate minor disputes into major campaigns could be useful if properly directed. Jake typed back. Dear Council, you can't bottle spite. It's a renewable resource that requires very specific conditions to activate. Dismissiveness, bureaucracy, and someone telling us we're wrong. Also, coffee. Lots of coffee. Feel free to try, but I suspect you'll just create a lot of very petty aliens. Good luck with that. Regards, Captain Morrison. He sent the message and went back to his coffee, grinning. 3 days later, he was approaching a station on the outer rim when his scanner picked up an interesting scene at the docking bay. A new customs officer was processing a ship to berths over. Jake couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the body language clearly enough. The customs officer appeared to be getting agitated. The pilot, a human woman with graying hair and a patient expression, was explaining something. The customs officer waved his appendages dismissively and opened his mouth to speak. Before he could get the words out, Glorp appeared from nowhere and tackled him to the ground. Jake watched through his viewport as Glorp held the customs officer down and appeared to be urgently whispering something in his ear. The customs officer's eyes widened. He looked at the human pilot, then back at Glorp, then nodded vigorously when Glorp let him up. The customs officer approached the human pilot with what looked like a formal bow and processed her paperwork without another word. Jake's communication console chimed. It was a message from Glorp. Saved another one. You're welcome. Jake laughed and typed back. Good work. Maybe the galaxy's learning after all. The truth was, the galaxy had learned. Stations ran smoother. Disputes were resolved faster. Customer service had improved dramatically because nobody wanted to be the person who accidentally activated a human S-spite mode. The phrase calm down had been effectively banned from common use, and everyone was better off for it. Humans hadn't conquered the galaxy with weapons or technology. They hadn't needed to. They'd done it by simply refusing to calm down when someone told them to, by being so stubbornly, magnificently petty that the entire galactic civilization had restructured itself around not triggering that response. It was beautiful in its own way. Humans had weaponized bureaucracy, paperwork, and passive aggression, and in doing so, had accidentally created a more just and attentive galaxy. Because when everyone knew that dismissing a complaint might result in a 3-month campaign of technically legal revenge, they tended to take complaints seriously from the start. Jake docked his ship, processed his cargo, and headed to the station's bar for a well-deserved drink. The bartender, a 6-armed flexoid named Mara, greeted him with a smile. Captain Morrison. Te usual? Te usual. Please. She poured his drink and slid it across the bar. Heard about what happened at Bay 7 Globes, becoming a real hero around here. He learned his lesson well. So did we all. Mara gestured around the bar, which had a new sign behind the counter. We listen here. Business is better than ever. Turns out when you actually address people's concerns instead of dismissing them, they become regular customers. Who knew? Jake raised his glass to cultural exchange. Mara clinked her glass against his, and 2 humans who refused to calm down. I am calm, Jake said with a perfectly straight face. This is just my face. Mara laughed, and Jake smiled into his drink. That phrase had caught on across the galaxy, too. I am calm. This is just my face had become humanity's unofficial motto, printed on shirts, mugs, and station signs. It was a reminder that just because someone looked intense didn't mean they were out of control. Sometimes intensity was just focus. Sometimes stubbornness was just determination. And sometimes spite was just another word for justice, with extra steps. The galaxy had learned to work with humanity's quirks instead of against them. And in the process, everyone had learned something valuable about listening, respect, and the dangers of dismissing someone's feelings. Because in a universe of logic and order, where most species prided themselves on rationality and efficiency, humans had reminded everyone that feelings matter, that being heard matters, that respect matters. And if you forgot that, if you dared to tell a human to calm down, well, you'd better have a lot of free time, because that human was going to make sure you remembered that lesson for the rest of your life. Jake finished his drink, paid his tab, and headed back to his ship. Tomorrow he'd haul another load of cargo to another station where nobody would tell him to calm down. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and Jake Morrison, humble cargo pilot, an accidental revolutionary, had proven the most important rule of human psychology. We're perfectly calm. Until you tell us we're not, then we'll show you what calm really looks like. It looks like 47,000 complaints, 3 restructured bureaucracies, and the galaxy that finally learned to listen. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to deliver his cargo in peace.